Alright, so this is a video for the Wuthering Heights presentation. Unfortunately, I don't actually have a poster for you, Joy, because my car has been broken down. And so I didn't quite have a car to go get poster and stuff to make it with, so instead I made a PDF file for you. It's got all the stuff that it wanted included in there, the author, the main characters, and then I will give the presentation of the summary of the story, the plot points, and the important analysis of the characters, like was outlined in the particular thing. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to use the presentation that I'm going to send you, so that way you can follow along while you watch the video. I'm going to post it to YouTube, and hopefully that link works. This is for scholastic purposes, anybody else random who finds this video. Alright, so I labeled this The Wuthering Heights Report by Zachary Picard, because including the name was important in the description of the overall assignment. But The Wuthering Heights is a book that is done by the author Emily Bront, I believe I said that right, who lived from July 30th, 1818 to December 19th of 1848. She was an English writer who was born in America, who was most well known for the book that she wrote, Wuthering Heights. It was actually the only book she ever wrote. She wrote this book, and then soon after she actually passed away. It was written and regarded well, even to the point where it is now considered a classic piece of American literature. It's considered a classic story. It brings together a lot of themes that are talked about in different elements of romantics and the outplaying of drama. They do bring some themes to what would be considered important in the modern society, which we will go over later. The book was written between October of 1845 and June of 1846. It was then published by Ellis Bell in 1847. The main focus of this book is the relationship between Catherine and Heathcliff's love and passion for each other. It is also a focus on the different relationship that the daughter of Catherine and Edgar, and her struggle through her trying to find a meaningful relationship with a man after her mother passed away when she gave birth to her. While the novel criticizes Catherine and Heathcliff's love with Edgar as sort of the love triangle, it is interesting to see how the author makes the point of that, because of the fact that she is trying to play out their excessive love as something that is far bigger and far more concentrated than she believes it really should be. The author views their loves to be bad or even immoral to a certain point. She sees their love as excessive and unnatural, unneeded, and this is shown in many scenes, which I will discuss in the overall summary. The second focus of this story is the relationship between Catherine and Harton, which it takes a long time for the book to progress to specifically cover that. But the overall ending of the relationship was really the important part in comparison to all the struggles that she had to get there. The quote from the book that I chose that I thought was very meaningful to the overall story and just kind of represented a good portion of what really brings elements of the stories to light here would be, it would degrade me to marry Heathcliff now, so he shall never know how I love him, and that not because he's handsome, Nellie, but because he's more myself than I am. Whatever our souls are made of, his and mine are the same, and it is as different as a moonbeam from lightning or frost from fire. She was trying to describe in this particular moment why she thought that they would not work together in comparison to Catherine and Edgar. Catherine and Edgar was a very high-class living society person who went through and had very respectable manners and was a very respectable person, and she found Heathcliff to be a wild-spirited person who was dirty and did not have great manners and also did not have great wealth. Of course, during this time, it was ideal to marry someone who was going through and had good wealth, good manners, and as she learned more about that, Edgar seemed a much more viable choice. Now, I chose to do an illustration of an important scene, which was one of the requirements in the particular assignment, and the one that I chose is an image that I drew of a man who is crying. And I chose to do this particular image. It was a study that I've been wanting to try and do for a while of a face, working on shading and shadows, because I'm not a great artist, as you'll be able to see when you actually get to look at the image. But I went through and did this to represent the point in which Edgar and Heathcliff felt when Catherine died, giving birth to the daughter. That was a pinnacle scene, and it really changed Heathcliff in how he began to make a progression towards a much worse character than he had started out being. It was a very pinnacle point in the story and a very big turning point. Now, the main characters that are most notable here are Heathcliff, a character that shows a multitude of changes throughout the book. He starts out by wanting to be with the mother, Catherine. I labeled her Old Catherine just to give a different distinction between the young Catherine and the older Catherine because they share the same name. And it was a character who wanted to be with Catherine, but was a wild-hearted, non-manner-built, very unclean man. Catherine finds Edgar, and when he shows his manner and high-class elements, she finds Heathcliff to be more of a poor choice because he is wild-hearted and not high-class and respectable. He becomes bitter in his later years. With the progression of that, with the progression of her choice to marry Edgar in the final decision, which he confronts her, and even in later moments where she is dying and he asks her to be with him, she can't because she's already married, and that goes through and crushes him, which leads not only for her to die, but she goes through or for her to become very, very ill. Sorry, not die. I mistaken the character there. That was my bad. But causes him to become a very bitter person. When he eventually dies, he actually went through, and when Edgar had died, he had the gravedigger uncover her grave and cut off half of the casket. So that way, when his casket was put down, he could put his half of the casket right next to her half of the casket, and they could lie together for eternity. Catherine, the older Catherine, or the mother Catherine, lived a very short life in the book, giving birth to the young Catherine and died in labor. She played an important part in the beginning of the story, where the story talks about the excessive love that the author played off to be. The relationship between Edgar and Heathcliff was a main point to the opening story and built up the plot, the rivalry for the girl and the differences that they had. It caused Catherine to eventually go with one over the other. Excuse me. Young Catherine, or the daughter Catherine, was the daughter of the mother Catherine, who experienced a lot of lost love over time. She wanted to be married and wanted to be loved, but the first man to present himself was a frail and complaining man. He was higher class, but he was not someone who she would have normally chosen out of a crowd or a group of people. She eventually finds love with Harton, progressing in a more normal speed in a way that the author shows that she believes love should progress. The first relationship between Catherine, Edgar, and Heathcliff, I really hope I'm saying that right, was very excessive, was very wild, was very immoral in some ways to the people who would read it, and definitely how the author wanted it to show the progression. However, in the relationship between Catherine and Harton, it was much more mild. They took it very slow. They progressed through each other and learned and spent more time with each other, took years to warm up to each other, worked through their differences, and then was able to have a very successful, happy relationship. Edgar, who is Catherine's father, the older Catherine's wife, was married to the older Catherine, Catherine's husband, sorry, not Catherine's wife, and an important person in the story. He raised Catherine in his way of living in the high class and state of being held with great manner. And one more that I forgot was the narrator of the story, whose name I am blanking upon. I apologize, give me just 1 second here. Oh no. I've got this. I'm just going to pause this real fast. No, I don't have a pause button. Shoot. I had notes here, and I don't know where the page went. I apologize for the delay here. Come on. Sorry, my computer is moving a little slow. It's on its last legs here. Right. Lockwood. Thank you. Sorry, I forgot the name of that particular character. Lockwood is the narrator who actually goes through, and between him and Nellie, which were the two main narrating characters, were able to actually express the entire story. The story was starting out with Lockwood going and visiting Wuthering Heights, which was a particular place, and he had an interaction with Heathcliff, and wanted to know what the story was behind him, behind who he was, behind the progression of his existence, and the girl Catherine who was there. He had found her very beautiful and was just looking for some more information. Having said that, Nellie, who was the servant, she had been with them for a very long time, and so she knew the whole story, and between the two of them, she told him the story, and he recorded it in his journal. Now, without that particular character, we wouldn't have gotten the narrative. It just wouldn't have happened. And having said that, we're going to jump right into the story, bending off of that. The story started out discussing Catherine and Heathcliff's relationship. Heathcliff was someone that they picked up who was an orphan. Most people in that family did not like him when he first got there. They progressed to a point where they really enjoyed him, especially Catherine. She grew to really like him and even love him. And because he was not officially part of the family, it was not weird. It was not like they were blood related in any way. They just loved each other. And they went through, and they were going really well and progressing. But then Catherine met some two people from a different Providence area, and I'm blanking on the name of it, but she went through, and it was Edgar and his sister, who was the people that she had met, and Heathcliff was becoming jealous with all the time that she was spending with Edgar. She thought that she may have general interest in him, and became very upset one day when he confronted her about this, and she said that Edgar and his sister were coming over to hang out, to spend some time together, and only Edgar came. On that day, they went through and they shared that they loved each other, and that he wanted to ask her to marry him. This was terrible for Heathcliff, and he actually missed a point of conversation where Catherine was telling Nellie about this information, and he got so angry and left right before he could hear that Catherine actually did love him. And they went through and progressed through that marriage. They had a kid, and unfortunately Catherine died. In the labor of that, and there was a very strong dislike between Edgar and Catherine, and their relationship ended in a way in which, you know, it was just a progression where Catherine became very ill. She became very sad. She realized she would not want to continue living without Heathcliff, and so they went through and they had this instance where he said he would not leave her, and when she started to have issues and collapse, he was asked to leave and to come back when she was feeling better, and that didn't end up working out the way that he wanted it to. They showed their relationship as a very destructive, very overly attached relationship, because Catherine had actually married Edgar instead of Heathcliff, because Edgar was a higher class person whom she believed to be the smarter choice in the relationship. Because of that, Heathcliff became very upset, and this started the progression of his character that really progressed downward. It was a very downward spiral of what happened there, and really a downward spiral in his behavior. Through the progression of it all, the young Catherine grew up and met a young, frail, and complaining man who really was an unpleasing option to her, but she didn't really have any other option. Harton was born a few years in between the story of events here, and he was living with Heathcliff. Heathcliff and Harton were in the same house, and Catherine was actually currently attracted, in the mildest of ways, to her cousin, which she didn't realize. They had met once before, and she thought he was a very frail person, but Heathcliff wanted to bring him to Wuthering Heights and raise him like his own son. And he did so, and in that particular instance, that was who she started to go with. Heathcliff wanted Catherine to marry that particular boy because he knew that Edgar was close to dying at the point in the story. When they were progressing to the point of relationship where they were going to get married, he was going to pass. He was going to pass very soon. He was ill. He was not doing well, and so they went through, and he was trying to get him married. Of course, Edgar did not realize this, and on his deathbed, he said that if it would make her happy, if it would make Catherine happy, he could get married to her. And so she did, and he treated Heathcliff treated her very poorly, and the cousin wanted to go through, and he was only interested in the stuff and in the inheritance, and eventually he passed on, which is where we meet Harton, which they had been always present. Harton had always been around, but she had mocked him for his inability to read, his lack of education, because Edgar, as I mentioned earlier, was someone who believed in education and manners and a good general self-respect. So, because Harton was not given this opportunity, the cousin was, he did not have a very good progression of exactly how to read and the education and the manners. So this was all new to him still. It was all a very new experience, and so she made fun of him for it. They had their differences for many years, but eventually it came to the point where they got over their differences. Heathcliff died, and then there was nothing in the way of them. She apologized to him. She wanted him to continue his education when she saw him trying. She gave him a book so that way he could learn to read and help him with that. And their relationship took a while to progress. They progressed through many problems. They progressed through their issues, their fighting, their disagreements, and they finally got to the point where they realized that they could love each other. And not only that they could love each other, but they wanted to love each other. And when they did so, they were able to have a much happier relationship. Now, this can show kind of in a modern sense why people would enjoy this, because the main concentration, while there was much that was left out in that summary, the real main points were covered. It was the two relationships that were the important parts of the story, that were not only a classic element for its time, but also for the new elements that you can see and be intrigued with today. The first relationship can be very obvious. Many teenagers, many kids rush into relationships with hard-boiled passion and just don't consider exactly what they should be doing instead of should not be doing or should be considering more carefully. Because they do this, they can get themselves into very negative situations wherein they go through and can't properly progress in the way that they know that they should. Having said that, they go through, and that is often a lot of focus on some of the modern relationships in books and movies where one is over-attached and it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem of jealousy or violence or anger between the two and a third party who is attracted to the woman or attracted to the man, depending on the relationship there and depending on the people in it and such. And they go through, and that can be seen as very appealing because those kinds of relationships are very common but very destructive. And then, of course, there's the second relationship between Catherine and Harton, which was a natural progression of a relationship, a positive progression of a relationship, in a realistic timeline where they both worked through their differences, worked through their issues, and came to love one another. And that can really show a good progression of exactly what a modern relationship could be interesting in a story, in an element, in a different setting that could be intriguing to different people. Having said all of that, that is the end. I hope that this was quality, what you were looking for, and I hope that you enjoy this presentation. Have a great day.